With that, we are going to cover a topic we covered quite a while ago. I was actually surprised to see the last time we covered it, and it was requested by a participant like you. So thank you for reaching out and asking for this. So we could go a little bit more into detail, which is, as I gave a preview to those who joined last week or so last week's recording, telecommunications in Israeli society. And what do I mean by that? Instead of reading a bill, we're going to go through, I don't want to say the history of telecommunications in Israel, but to understand the words that we use to describe a very, very common thing in Israel, and how it works and how it doesn't work, we need to understand a little bit of the history, the cultural history, and the baggage of it. So we're going to go through about 30 years worth of history. We're going to look at some commercials from actually 40 years ago. We're going to look at a couple different companies, and we're going to look at some great consumer awareness products out there for you as well. If you have questions as I'm typing, please write in the Q&A. Also, remember, folks, it's okay to just sit back and watch. Take old school pen and paper. Remember, you'll get a recording of this. So if you're urgently asking me a question or typing it right now, maybe I'm going to answer it. So maybe wait with that question until at least 2/3 of the way through class, because often that's the case. I go through the Q&A and I see questions that I already addressed. I love people's enthusiasm, but trust me when I say I'm probably going to answer your question. If I don't, that's what the Q&A is there for after I teach. Let's get started. So first, we're going to discuss, as soon as I can open up the right, here we go. All right, the list, here we go. Okay. So as always, I'm going to share the spreadsheet with vocabulary, but there are going to be other windows I'm going to be showing during this. We'll be sure to send you all the links to all the different things we're going to show you, including a PDF copy of this spreadsheet with vocabulary. So first off, basic terminology, but it's not basic terminology. So again, please, folks, please listen. If you have a question that's urgently burning in your head, can I suggest that you write it down on a piece of paper or write it on your cell phone, as what we're going to talk about today, and then come back to it, because I'd like you to focus at least on what we're doing. And if I didn't answer your question, by all means, ask it. So first off, let's make it very simple. Telephone. Okay. Telephone is a catch-all term. But telephone is not a catch-all term, and please listen very carefully. Yes, telephone is the catch-all term for your primary phone number in Israel. Okay, increasingly, most people's primary number is their cell phone, not a landline. Okay, telephone can refer to either a landline or your primary phone number. If you want to specify that it's a cell phone number, you're going to use this word, nayad. Out of all the different words we have that we use in Israeli society right now to describe this thing, the one that's quote unquote the most Hebrew is nayad. Nayad means mobile, right? It's related to the word yad, hand, meaning it's something that you can pick up and take with you by hand. The opposite of nayad doesn't actually have to do with phones, it has to do with computers. It's a term that we use quite a lot when we're talking about computers, which is nayach. Nayach has to do with a desktop, right? Because it's something that sits or that rests, from the verb lehaniach, to rest or to lie down, right? So just as a machshev nayad, a mobile computer you can hold in your hand and take with you, a machshev nayach, a desktop computer, you can't. Think about, the big screen or even a skinny screen and the separate computer and the keyboard doesn't work. So nayad, whenever you hear the word nayad, it always has to do with a cell phone. Telephone may not. Increasingly it does, because again, fewer and fewer people at home at least have a cell phone, have a landline. And if you do, please don't come after me in the comments, folks. It's 9.5 million people here. We all do things differently, but increasingly, most people have it, and specifically to Israeli society, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Okay. The original term, this is what I would call a party gag. You need to impress some people to know your breadth and depth of the Hebrew language and the history of it and the revival of the Hebrew language at the turn of the 20th century, you will know the word sach rachok. Sach, like the word sicha, has to do with conversation, talking, and rachok, distant. So a distant conversation was one of the terms proposed by Eliezer ben Yehuda for the term telephone. It never caught on. It was never adopted either by the people or by the Academy of the Hebrew Language, which we always talk about. A very important institution to this day. We have a whole class on that in our archive on YouTube. Okay. The very first company to offer cell phones in Israel is called Pelephone. And to this day, many people will call a cell phone, regardless of what provider they have, they will call it a Pelephone. Because Pelephone also sounds Hebrew, right? Because Pelephone is comprised of the word telephone at the end, but the word Pele, wonder, right? The wonder phone. And before we go on, I actually want to show you one of the very first commercials for the very first cell phone in Israel. Think about what countries you're from and how the cell phone was introduced. Very similar way as in Israel, with some notable exceptions we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I want to share with you this ad. It's from the 1980s. You'll get it's the 1980s. You don't need to know a lot of Hebrew to figure out, at the very least, who the audience for the very first cell phone in Israel was. You don't have to understand anything else other than think about where this cell phone is being used, and I'll explain as we go.
הלו? בני, טוב שצלצלת. מאיפה אתה מדבר? טלפון ציבורי. שיגעון, מצוין. תשמע, הדבר הכי חשוב היום זה שהמשלוח יגיע בשעה 4 לנמל. גמור? גמור. אוקיי. לפני שאני שוכח, תגיד לרוני שימכור את המניות של עתידות נפט.
Okay, so first off, yes, this is the 1980s. Yes, he's doing something wildly illegal and holding his phone while talking and not using a speakerphone. Again, this was brand new on the market. But what is he doing? He's talking about he's calling on his phone. Someone calls him. He's picking up, and he's saying, "Lifnei shani shocheach," before I forget, tell Roni. תגיד לרוני שימכור את המניות של עתידות נפט. Tell Roni to sell the stocks in oil futures, right? You'll see why he's saying that in a second. Right? He's driving through the countryside. He realizes there isn't much at stake in oil futures in Israel, and then this happens. Right? And what does he say? Tikne, tikne, tikne. Buy it, buy it, buy. Right? Why? Because he sees an oil field in the background that's bursting forth with oil. And lo ishtagati, I didn't go crazy. Yesh pele. Right? There's a wonder. Right? And then pelephone. The greatest invention since the telephone. ההמצאה הגדולה ביותר מאז הטלפון. Okay, that's one of the very first commercials for a cell phone in Israel, marketed by the company Pelephone. So just like with a lot of other brands in the world, not just in Israel. Think for Americans, Kleenex or Xerox, or for Brits and other English speakers, the Hoover, right? That the name of the first company or the most popular brand of the company becomes synonymous with the product itself, regardless of the brand. Same thing here. People will call their Pelephone Pelephone, even if they're on a different provider. Pelephone, just like cell phones elsewhere in the world, was a company that was started here by Motorola, and it was specifically for the business world. Just like this guy making a business deal on the phone while traveling, he happened to see oil being struck in the field. Ani lo ishtagati yesh pele. I didn't go crazy. There's a wonder, i.e. the oil, sell, sell, sell. He wouldn't have been able to do that had he not had his cell phone on him, right? That's the whole idea behind the premise of it. Early on, it was only available to companies. As the 80s entered into the 90s, it became more popular. Why? What happened in the 1990s in Israeli society? We had a string of piguim, of terrorist attacks throughout the country, terrible, horrible numbers, and it became increasingly easier and more efficient and cheaper for people to call on cell phones and to have a cell phone on them in case, God forbid, something happened, but in general to be in touch, right? Israel, like other Mediterranean, Middle Eastern countries, is a very tight-knit community. We're always in touch. We're always in each other's business, for lack of a better term. But it was also to always be in touch. So in the 90s, you saw increasingly more and more people using them. By the mid 90s, the cell phone market was open to competition. More and more people had cell phones on them, more so than most countries. At a certain point in the last 30 years, Israel was the second biggest per capita consumer of cell phones after South Korea, right? For a lot of reasons that I just said, and for even more. And it wasn't by the mid 90s, it wasn't just Pelephone. You had Cellcom, you had Orange, the three big ones that have since splintered off. Before we get into more of the history of it, um, because there is more history, how we pay and why we pay the way we do with cell phones in Israel. Let's do a little bit more vocabulary. First off, the word cellular. Cellular simply means a cellular phone. If someone says mispar cellulari, right, jumping ahead to the word for number, that means their cellular phone number. We have different ways to say the same thing, right? Nayad, telephone, pelephone, cellular, and kav, line, right? Kav is literally a line, but it's also your phone line, your phone number, right? Or a kava telefoni, your phone line, right? The line on which you call. Mispar simply means a number. And just like in English, where we have the abbreviation NO dot, you have the same thing in Hebrew. Mem samech geresh, that apostrophe, is the abbreviation for mispal. So if you're ever wondering what it is, now you know, right? Because we love abbreviations in Hebrew. The shorter, the more compact the word, the better. Number is a mispal. A digit is a sifra. And we've talked about this difference before when we did automated phone menus. And I'm going to include some of the vocabulary in addition to this spreadsheet when you get a copy of this recording. Sifra is a digit, right? What's the difference between a number and a digit? I leave that up to you to figure out. But in Hebrew, we have a difference, just like we have in English. Number, mispal, digit, sifra. Multiple digits, sifrot. At the beginning of any phone number in Israel, there's a kidomet. Kidomet simply means a prefix, or in this case, an area code. It used to be very simple to figure out a phone number in Israel. If it was a landline, right, a kav telefoni, the first two digits of the number, the first number being 0, would indicate where in the country someone is. So 02, they're calling on a landline from Jerusalem. 03, they're calling from the Tel Aviv metropolitan area on a landline. 04, they're calling from Haifa on a landline, and so forth. Okay. When the cell phone companies started in the 1980s and 90s, they got their own prefixes, right? So for many years, you knew exactly who had what provider. If a phone number began with 050, that was someone who was on Pelephone. If they had 052, they were on Cellcom. If they were on 054, they were on Partner, which used to be Orange, and so forth, right? Nowadays, that's changed, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit when we get to accounts. But one of the further reforms in the telecommunications world in Israel is that you can take your phone number with you even if you change providers. It used to be for many years, if you switched from Pelephone to Cellcom or vice versa, your number could not travel. You had to get a whole new number because, right, that prefix, that kidomet, meant you were a subscriber of that company's service. That is no longer the case. So you could have gone from a Pelephone to Cellcom and still retain your 050 number. Okay. Finally, some other vocabulary before we get into the details. We've talked about these words before. It's very important, especially as we're talking about telecommunications. Lechayeg and lehakesh. Both of these can be translated as to dial, but that's incorrect. Lechayeg means to dial as in a rotary phone. And we've talked about this difference in the context of automated phone menus. If you're on an automated phone menu in Hebrew, invariably you will be because the English is not going to necessarily fulfill everything you need. Or you see a big billboard on the side of the road, it's going to say chaygu. Chaygu is the plural command form of the verb lechayeg, and it means to dial. Obviously, we're not using rotary phones anymore. Remember the wheel, and you have to do that, like wind it around, right? It comes from the word chug, the idea of a circle and circular movement. But lechayeg simply means to dial. When you see something that tells you, or an instruction on an automated phone menu that tells you chaygu, it means you need to hang up and dial a brand new number. Versus lehakesh. Lehakesh means to press like a button. Like if you press a doorbell button, that's lehakesh. Or if you have a smartphone and you're pressing on the screen, that's also lehakesh. Okay. And usually the command form is hakesh or hakishu if it's plural. Okay, that means to press. That will be in the context of an automated phone menu. And again, whole previous class on this will send you that vocabulary sheet as well. That simply means there's an automated phone menu and it'll say for English, press this, for Hebrew, press that, right? That's what hakesh and hakishu means in that context. Okay, a few more words we need to know before we get into how do you choose cell phone plan, right? First off is the word smartphone. That's a pretty standard word. Smartphone is the vast majority of what the phones are here in Israel, with the exception of one that's unique to Israeli society, which is called a telephone kasher or a cellular kasher, literally a kosher phone. Okay, this is a phone that is specifically marketed towards we talked the other week about identities and demographics. What we say in Hebrew, hamigzar hacharedi or hachevra hacharedit. The Haredi community, not all the Haredi community uses a telephone kasher, but they're the ones who are most wanting this, which is essentially a stripped down phone. It may not even be a smartphone. It could be an old Nokia phone or an old Motorola phone, but the idea is that it doesn't have internet access, or if it does, it's very restricted. And usually it doesn't have SMSs. If it does, again, very restricted. Okay. It's mainly for calling, oftentimes getting audio recordings, listening to different teachings from a yeshiva, or getting messages about different aspects of life, but there is no access to the internet for sure, let alone internet in general. Okay, and if there is, very limited. Okay. First word you should always know in Israel, whenever you're buying anything, anything, is obviously the word hatzat mechir, right? Hatzat mechir is a price offer, a price proposal. And we're going to send this to you as well in the automated phone menu about always asking for things in writing. Why? It used to be, up until very recent times, that when you went to go get a cell phone subscription, didn't matter what company, up until about 10 or so years ago, maybe a little bit longer. Certainly I made Aliyah, which is now almost exactly 19 years ago, um, you went to a cell phone store or a store that was either an official one of the three major companies, at that time, Pelephone, Cellcom, and Orange, or a subsidiary of it. And you sat down with a agent, and they would take out a blank piece of paper and they would scribble all this stuff on it. They would ask you questions like, how often do you use your phone? How many phone calls do you make in a given period? Do you call abroad? Do you need this service or that service or whatever it is? They'll write it all down, and on the spot, they'll give you a hatzat mechil, a price proposal offer. Well, the problem with that, just like anything that's written down like that, is that it's not standardized, right? That's the equivalent of going to shuk or any open air market and haggling with the person. Because you could sit there and actually walk away with a decent price if you know how to haggle. If you don't know how to haggle, you could end up spending a lot of money on something that wasn't worth it. Then came a big revolution in telecommunications. And I need to show you it before in order to illustrate it. Where are you? Here you are. Big revolution in Israeli telecommunications, and we have to thank a fellow Oleh, right? One of the reasons why I'm always insistent about teaching you Hebrew at any level based on topic is because Olim consistently show up and change this country for the better. Case in point, Golan. Golan was started by a French Oleh who said, enough of this, enough of the scribbling on a piece of paper that not even native Hebrew speakers understand, enough of being fleeced of all our money. I want to know what I'm buying up front, and I can probably make it cheaper as a result, because I'm going to bring the trust that's otherwise absent from the three big companies. Golan was launched. It was a huge scandal at the time. The three big companies didn't want any other competition. Golan really pushed very hard to get into the market. And the way they got in was saying, I'm going to write it all down for you. You can go on our website. You can go to even one of our stores or a stand, right? But everything's going to be written out for you in advance. It's the same price you're going to get as your friend is going to get. I'm not going to make a deal for you versus the other person. One simple deal. Now, of course, there are packages, but the idea is the same. Anyone, regardless of how often they use phone, can choose what they pick. Golan first started without actually getting a phone. You had to come with the phone. They've subsequently opened up. So I want to show you what it looks like for those of you who are interested, whether you have yet to make Aliyah, you have heard about Golan and you have another package. I'm not pushing one company over another, both because I don't get royalties over it, but also this just happens to be the one I have after many years with Celcom, right? So if you go to their website, they have a whole bunch of stuff on offer. If you go to the top, even though it says English here, trust me, folks, there isn't much English on this website, but it's a great service in that you get different packages. Chul, meaning using your phone abroad. Meda utmicha, right? Information and support. eSIM, those of you who have phones enabled with eSIMs, learning how to use that with Golan. eSIM l'shaon, if you have a smartwatch that also takes an eSIM. Dor Chamesh, fifth generation phones. Hachul Kalul. Achul means going abroad. Chutz la'aretz stands for chutz la'aretz, being abroad outside of the land of Israel. Kalul. Kalul means included or all inclusive. Golan Cyber. Dor 2 ו-3, Golan Cyber, a lot of the telecommunications, which were only doing cell phones, are now branching out into providing home internet. And then finally, if you have a generation 2 or 3 phone, a more simpler phone. Let's say you want Hakol Kalul, and I'm going to show you why many of you on this call are going to be interested in Hakol Kalul. One of the words we're about to learn in a second is chavila, but a great segue into that is learning it here. Chavila means a package. Chavilat hachul kalul. Compound words, we talked about that a few weeks ago, right? This is the all-inclusive abroad package, if I was to literally translate it. Kalul, inclusive. Chul, abroad. Chavila, package. We read it based on how compound words are formed in Israel, the package of a broad all-inclusive. Okay, what does it include? And some of this is also some of the innovations it has brought to the market that is then offered by pretty much almost everyone. Hamon glisha ba'aretz uvachul. Okay, internet usage in Israel and around the world, 550 gigabytes of internet usage on 5G every month, and 12 gigabytes of online use abroad every month anew. Okay, 500 minutes from Israel to abroad every month. Incoming and outgoing conversations, calls to abroad, and obviously the same in Israel, calls and messages, for a monthly payment of 129 shekel only. And בנוסף, שירות מספר ויטואלי ושירות מספר בינלאומי. So first off, you remember that abbreviation, mem samech, means number. In addition, שירות מספר וירטואלי, You get a virtual number service and an international number. What does this mean? When you sign up for a package like this, specifically with Golan, not many of the other providers offer this, you get what they call a mispal beinlumi, which is essentially this. Let's say you're an American. You make Aliyah. Someone's invariably going to ask me, how do I keep my number in America here? I'll explain it from what I understand a little bit, but the shorter answer is it's difficult. But you can open up a mispal beinlumi. You can be assigned for free in that same package an American number. You can even choose the area code from a list of options. And so people from America can call that number and it'll be rerouted to your Israeli phone. So for example, let's say I am on Golan. I have a number that's based on the East Coast, where I'm originally from, but not exactly where I'm from. Someone can call that East Coast number, and for whatever they have to pay for a local call or a national call or whatever it is on their own phone, they can call me in Israel. So it's not considered an international call for them. And for me, it's part of that whole package. It's irrelevant. Okay, it's a big innovation for those of us who make Aliyah and want that basically forwarding number. And it's based in whatever country we're from within a um, set amount of countries that can be in touch with us whenever they and people can call at the price of a local call. Now, before everyone starts asking me, I did look it up. First off, I looked it up the same way you're going to look it up. How do you keep a number when you make Aliyah from abroad to here? It's very difficult. Okay. Telephone, Cellcom, Golan, partner, they're not going to recognize your number. There is a whole process called porting where you basically export your local number in whatever country you're from to a virtual phone number, such as Google Phone or another program, and it'll preserve that for you, and then you can create a forwarding service to your Israeli phone. I highly recommend because people came after me in the comments last week saying, well, I have a business. Well, first off, if you have a business, maybe it's best to hold on to your own phone number abroad. But second, if this is something of interest to you, simply Google it. There isn't much more to be done with this other than Googling it and some very clear instructions how to do this, even powered by AI. Okay. But let's get back to our lesson because that does come up with some of the words we're going to get and some of the words we just saw, in fact. So you saw the word chavila. Package, chavila is any kind of package. It could be something that comes in the mail, but when we're talking about telecommunications, right, it's the amount of minutes you get, the amount of cell phone time you get, the amount of internet usage you get, right? Everything included is called a chavila. That's for everything, by the way. Any service provider, they'll use the term chavila. Dakot. Dakot means minutes. Um, Something very important, which we're going to get to in Sichot and Hodot. I'll actually wait for that in a second. Dakot simply means minutes, like telling the time. But as you saw in that one Hatzat Mechil, right, which was all laid out for you, how many minutes you get in exchange for X amount of money. Glisha. I saw some people in last week's comments coming after me. Jay, why did you spend so much time talking about summertime in Israel and Glisha? First off, it's a very popular sport in Israel. Second, we won our first Olympic gold medal, Bizchut Glisha, with thanks to surfing, specifically Glishat Ruach. It's a very popular sport here. So and you'll see it again. We're using this word yet again in a very everyday thing. Glisha means surfing, like we used to use in the 1990s, surfing the internet. We use it to this day in modern Hebrew. You even saw it in that Hatzat Mechil from Golan, right? Surfing means internet usage, surfing the internet. We still use the same term. When you see the word Glisha with telecommunications, it means surfing internet usage. How much can you go on? Okay. Sichot and hodaot. Sichot literally means conversations, but in the context of this, it means calls. And hodaot literally mean messages, but in the context here, it means SMS. Why are these two important? Again, going back to that Hatzat Mechil, it used to be, just like in other countries around the world, that it was much more expensive to make a phone call than it was to send an SMS. right? In Israel, it used to be the same thing as it was in many other countries. There were set blocks of the day, usually in the evening, where you got a discount on getting and receiving phone calls. And likewise, people didn't necessarily um, call all the time. So first off, if you ever wondered why in Israel we don't normally send voicemail. Let's say you're calling someone in Israel and they don't pick up, or vice versa. They're trying to call you, you can't answer. They're not going to leave you a voicemail, even in 2025. Why? Because that phone call cost them a lot of money. To stay on the line and to leave you a voicemail was even more money. So it's simply easier to just show up in your list of recent phone numbers that someone called, and either they would try calling you back or you were expected to try calling them back, right? To this day, Israelis by and large do not leave voicemail. That's also a generational thing. The younger you are, you absolutely will not leave a voicemail, much less check it. So I've had that happen with family members and loved ones. They've left me a voicemail message. I didn't check it for weeks. You don't check voicemail in Israel, even to this day, because of that many years ago how expensive it was to place a call. Instead, it was much cheaper to send an SMS. We even have the verb lesames, to send a message, but it was SMS, the old school texting, right? Where you, if you had the old school phone with the alphanumeric keyboard, you had to keep pressing to get to the right number or letter. That was still cheaper to send an SMS to someone in Israel than it was to call them. And that also materializes today why WhatsApp is so popular in Israel for two reasons. One, because we inherited that tradition of texting. Second, because WhatsApp can also be used not just on your data package, your glisha, but also on Wi-Fi. You can theoretically use Wi-Fi for free, right? If you have access to Wi-Fi, you can send WhatsApps for free. So the idea is WhatsApp has increasingly become the preferred means of communication in Israel. At a certain point in the last few years, Israel was the largest per capita consumer of WhatsApp. I know that still comes as a shock to many Americans, including maybe on this call. Everyone in Israel uses WhatsApp. They use it not just to make one-on-one calls, they'll use it for group calls, they'll use it for video, they'll use it for all sorts of different things. So this may be a big cultural hurdle for many of you coming from North America. You have to get on board with WhatsApp. Better to do it now than later. Everyone uses WhatsApp for all those reasons I just explained, right? And in that package, you also saw the words were even written in English, right? MB and GB. In English, megabyte and gigabyte. In Hebrew, we simply say mega or giga. Okay, it's not gigabyte in Hebrew, it's giga. Let's move on, right? No need to fight that one. There's another provider before I get into the next part of this that I want to share with you, because this one is also very popular among Olim for a very, very basic reason you're going to see very quickly. Okay. This one is called Anatel. Anatel, this is what happens when you go on the Anatel main page, right? Israelis are almost but of French or French speaking origin, discover our offers in French. Israelis are almost Israelis, but originally from North America or English speaker, check out our offers in English. Even before you get to the website and their offers and their Hatzaot Mechil, their price offers, you know this is going to be meant for you. Well, first off, that's great. And you're going to see, I'm going to show you very quickly what it looks like, but you're all consumers. I'm not only sharing with you what to look for and how to read one of these Hatzat Mechil for cell phone. You can do shopping. There are many, many cell phone providers now. It used to be you picked one based on what your friends and family were on. That's no longer the case, right? There is no discount to call a fellow Cellcom provider versus in between accounts. It doesn't work like that anymore. It's very competitive. There are more and more players with it. Anatel is one of them, right? So Anatel on its face sounds very easy because it's going to help you in English or in French very quickly. And you see you have a whole bunch of options just like before. A mobile, prepaid phone, internet packages, a whole package, business, and so forth, or landline for those of you who still want that, right? Let's say you go for the package. You have a couple different options, right? You can do a multi-line bundle. If you have multiple phone numbers that phones in your house and you want to do it, you could do internet and mobile, and you get all sorts of things that are similar to the Golan one, right? Calls to Israel, American, and Canadian mobiles and landlines into landlines of 30 plus destinations, SMS to Israel mobiles into the US and Canada, 50 gigabytes mobile internet. You can read this all because it's in English, right? One of the pluses it does have that many of the other service providers also have is that it gives you this free use of WhatsApp and Waze from more than 45 countries around the world, right? WhatsApp is so important in Israel, folks, and Waze, which we use all the time for GPS, which is an inter-Israeli invention. We use it so much that many service providers use it as leverage to get you in. Don't waste your data on it. We'll give it to you for free or included in what you pay. Okay. But price points are for each person to figure out and shop around. Let's go back to our initial page, and then I have a few more things I want to show you before I open up for questions. If we're already talking about telecommunications, we need to talk about internet. Internet, right? We had that word glisha. We have to talk about internet. Internet increasingly is also competitive. It is also sometimes even offered by cell phones. Cell phone companies will also provide home internet packages. The big one, the original one, just like the original cell phone provider was Pelephone, the original one is still one of the biggest is Bezek, right? Which both provides phone and internet. In Israel, you pay two separate things, but ultimately you're often buying it in one chabila. We split how you get internet into your home into two aspects, tashtit and sapak. Tashtit literally means infrastructure, and it's the company which provides the physical connection to the internet, the wires, the router, the physically connecting you from your home to the power lines outside your home to a whole larger network. That's called tashtit. And then in addition, you have Sapak. Sapak literally means a service provider. We use this for everything. A service provider could be the people who bring copy paper to your office, to the person who's catering a wedding, to, in this case, internet. And this is the company which provides the account and virtual connection to the internet. It used to be, unfortunately, you had to order these two things separately. And obviously, you had to coordinate yourself, being the consumer, when one of them would come and then connect with the tashdid and the sapak, and it was a total nightmare, right? Nowadays, you can do that, and you can also simply buy it all together. You don't have to worry about all this. Tashdid gets installed. Sapak is also right there. You get all the information. You sign up. Everything's plugged in, and you go immediately. Okay, much easier now. And part of that is getting the natav, the router, the thing, the modem. We don't use that word much anymore, right? But the device that connects between your wireless network or an actual computer to the wall, to the tashdit outside. Kabel is a cable. Sivim optim, optic fibers. More and more of Israel is getting on optic fibers as opposed to old school phone lines. I just had mine installed the other day. They're smaller, they're more agile to deal with outside weather. Worth looking into if your provider has it. Some verbs, and then one last thing before I open up for questions. I'm going to share with you again that automated phone menus in the recap of this lesson. For those of you who go to YouTube to see our previous lessons, if you go in the description, you'll see links to all the different resources we provide, including the spreadsheets. So that's where it will be. Okay. Lehitchaber means to get or become connected. You're going to see this verb used a lot, obviously, with telecommunications. To get connected, click here, right? Lehitchaber, to get connected. The opposite is lehitnatek, to get disconnected. Lehitnatek, to become or get disconnected. Lehitzdaref is to join a plan, to join a chavila, to join a company, whatever it may. It can also be, by the way, to join a gym. to join a club, anything like that. Manui is a subscription, right? You have a subscription to something. And a cheshbon is an account. Okay, very standard words. All these are the standard words you're going to see in any hatzat mechil, any price proposal you get from any either nayad or cellular, depending on how you want to call it, service or internet service. One last resource, and then I'm going to open it up for questions or start answering questions in the Q&A. A very important resource that I think we shared many lessons ago, but this one's really important. This is also with all the reforms we talked about, right? About making things easier to sign up for, especially with internet and cell phone. This was a game changer and still remains to this day. This is called Netek. Netek.co.il. Don't worry, don't ask me in the comments, folks. You're going to get this email. Trust me, you're going to get this URL as well. Netek is the easiest way to disconnect lehit natek, right? It's from that same sholish, three-letter root of how to disconnect from services. And you'll see in the list of available ones to disconnect from, Cellcom, Pelephone, Partner, Mears, which is another telecommunications company, Bezek, I just talked about, Rami Levy, Golan, Bezek Benlumi, ICOM 018, NetVision. Yes, all the big companies that you would need to have excuse me, a manui or a cheshbon with, a subscription or an account. And it used to be very difficult to disconnect. I'm no longer interested in the service. I would like to cancel my subscription. You had to go through multiple rounds, often unfortunately having to yell at someone or asking for the manager before you were finally freed from a service provider. Now it's very easy. By law, the moment you say on the phone to someone, I want to be disconnected, ani rotze להתנתק, they have to do it. Or you can go through this website and you don't have to worry about any of it. So let's say I no longer want hot cable at home. I can click on hot, right? And the next step will be filling out my details. And the third stage will be they will disconnect you. This service will disconnect you. You will no longer be paying or have a manui or a subscription or a cheshbon, an account with said company, right? There's a whole bunch of other ones here. By the way, there's also Tami Alba and Niviot, which deliver water tanks to your home, right? Lut and Pausa is another one here. This is a great resource if you don't know about Netek. Saves a lot of headaches. With that, let me answer some questions. Actually, before we do that, first off, Toda Rabah, thank you all for joining. We're currently at 317 participants, which is always amazing. We remain the world's largest regularly scheduled Hebrew class and Israel Life Hacks class. So, Toda Rabah lekulam. Thank you all for joining. Next week's class is a very important class, a regular topic here at Cafe Oleh that we will always cover, which I call media literacy or simply how to read the news. No matter at what level of proficiency you are, how to read mainstream news, how to access it, what to look for, what are the headlines, what are the subheadlines, what do I, based on what are my needs in consuming information, need to focus on, and other things I can ignore. We're going to look at that next week. Very important class because, as always, news is breaking here, just like how cell phones became so popular in Israel. One of the reasons why is that news always changes fast, and you need to be informed. You need to be updated when possible. That's going to be a very important class for you all to join next week. Let me get to some of the Q&A in the group. If Israelis do not use voicemail, then why do they set it up on their phones? Phones usually come automated with voicemail on their phone. It's always there. I have voicemail on my phone. I never, ever check my voicemail. And Israelis know, still to this day, by and large, you do not leave a voicemail. The people who do leave voicemails are automated telemarketing companies. And you'll even hear it when you call into the voicemail, you'll hear an automated message midway through because that's when it clicked on recording. By and large, we don't use it. Simply what happens, phone etiquette, if you call someone and they're busy, you wait a respectable amount of time. It could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, it could be the second half of the day, it could be the next day. one of you will call the other. If they don't call you, you'll call them. Even if you play phone tag, that's still cheaper 30 years ago than it is leaving a voicemail. I get calls and I can't figure it out, often charities. Um, you can simply hang up. If it's something you don't understand, and we have that in our automated phone menus, that you'll get the dialogue that you need to say to someone, sorry, I'm busy. Slicha, ani tafus. Or for a woman, slicha, ani tfusa. For female, ani tfusa. But you can simply hang up. What are the plurals for mega and giga? There aren't. We simply say chamesh mega, chamishim mega, chamesh mod mega. There is no plural. Okay. Um, People on speakerphone in public places. Can you say אפשר להנמיך את השיחה? No. אפשר להנמיך את הקול. Because להנמיך means to lower. So it's not to lower the call, it's to lower their voice. But I actually had to do that the other day on the Rakevet Kala, the light rail here in Israel. A woman had her phone at full blast talking, and I think she was even listening to something, and she had ozniot, headphones, earphones right around her neck. And I looked at her after giving her a few stares. I'm like, and I said to her, Slicha, אפשר להשתמש באוזניות? Can you use your headphones? And the next, some other guy realizing that it was actually okay to stop her also chimed in. And then before she got to it, she gave me a very smug look, like, oh, of course I'll do it because someone asked, otherwise I would get away with it. I said to her very bluntly, "את לא היחידה פה. You're not the only person here." Um, I need to know which companies will let me receive verification codes via SMA from my banks and Fidelity. Great question. It's very difficult in Israel. Unless you do that porting thing I talked about and just Google it, porting. How do I save my phone number before moving abroad? Type it any iteration of that in Google, it'll tell you how to do that because otherwise, even that virtual number through Golan and other companies will not let you do that. Okay. That is considered something, first off, it's on the border, its legality is one question, but it doesn't work. Okay. If you set up a virtual number here in Israel through Golan or something like that, to people get in touch with you, the SMSs won't work. You can try doing the mobile thing, right? The porting system that I told you about to look up, to see if that will work. I can't guarantee that though. Suggestion phone prompts, like I said, folks, you're getting all that dialogue. We've covered it months ago. I'm going to send it to you again. I learned in Ulpan lehitzteltzel or litzaltzel. No one uses this anymore, folks. With all due respect to Ulpan, God bless them for teaching you litzaltzel. We don't use that verb. It means to ring, like a bell rings, but we don't use that in regular conversation with regarding telecommunications. Are companies like Anatel that cater to Anglos charging a premium for it? You're a consumer. You can make that decision for yourself. I just showed you two different cell phone companies. You can go online, type in Telecommunications of Israel. You'll see all the different cell phone providers in Israel. Do your research. But now you know the vocabulary to look what is important to me. Ezo chavila, right? What is the package I need? Dakot, minutes, sichot, calls, glisha, internet usage. You have all those words. Your decision how much you want to pay and how much you need. Isn't HeatNetTech also used to log out of account online? Yep, it means to disconnect. I disconnect the cable. I disconnect from a account that I need to sign in on, but also disconnect from a service provider. Are Android or iPhones more common in Israel, or is it roughly 50-50? I don't know the statistic off the top of my head, but both are very popular. You can find iPhones here as much as you can find Androids. Absolutely. How to go to previous classes several times, like I said at the top of the hour, folks, youtube.com. Type in Cafe Oleh. How is it best to get the telecoms company to agree to setting up a direct debit from a bank account rather than using a direct debit credit card? So again, Anatel, you don't need to be physically be in Israel, right? It said Israelis are planning to move abroad. Click here. And they have all sorts of services for people who are either not yet in Israel or are not planning to be here full time. So you can look that up on your own. Okay. Okay, with that, in terms of questions that are related to today's class, that's it. If you have any other questions I didn't get to in the Q&A or that you just have, please email us. It's the easiest way to get in touch with us. I'll be happy to be in touch with you directly. Again, Toda Rabah, thank you all for joining. A copy of this class, along with all the different websites, along with all the different spreadsheets, both the one we went over, one we've gone on in the past that have to do with telecommunications, will be included when we upload this in the next day or two onto YouTube. Next week, like I said, media literacy, mainstream news source. Okay, folks, mainstream news source that the vast majority of Israelis access on a regular basis. We'll be looking at and how to read together, no matter what proficiency level. Hopefully by then, as we say in Hebrew, we will have bisorot tovot, good news. But in the meantime, toda rabah and litrot. See you all very soon.